What if I told you the most haunting sound to her isn't your voice? It's your absence. Not your explanations, not your pain, not your need to be understood. Just silence, pure, steady, unshaken silence. But not the kind born from bitterness. The kind that rises from self-respect. From a man who no longer needs to prove his worth, to someone who walked away from it. She expected noise, pleading, chasing, just one more message, because that would mean you're still orbiting her, still emotionally tethered, still available. But what she didn't expect was the void, the clean, ruthless absence of a man who finally stopped bleeding energy into someone, who never poured any back. That's when it flips. That's when the silence becomes unbearable, not for you, but for her, because in that space, she hears everything she didn't notice when you were present. The care, the presence, the consistency she once took for granted. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You're rebuilding, quietly. You've stopped reacting. And in doing so, you've become the one thing she never thought you'd be, unreachable. The truth is, pain didn't destroy you, it awakened you. It stripped away your illusions and left you standing in something cleaner than hope. Clarity. That's what Stoicism is. Not numbness, not indifference, but emotional mastery. The rare kind that makes her remember you, not for what you said, but for what you withheld. So if you're done performing, done chasing, done being her emotional safety net, then let's begin this journey now. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, turn on notifications, and comment below. I choose presence over performance. Because the man who becomes still becomes unforgettable. Now, let's dive in. 1. She left, so did you. There's a moment after she leaves that feels like free fall. It's not just about the absence of her voice, her touch, or her presence. It's about the disorientation of losing the version of yourself who existed only in relation to her. The man who waited for texts that never came, who explained himself just to avoid silence, who gave more than he ever received. That man, the one who tolerated being overlooked, overextended, and undervalued, didn't survive the goodbye. You didn't just lose her, you lost the part of you that allowed love to be a performance, measured by how much effort you gave and how little she returned. And while the pain of her absence cuts deep, what hurts more is realizing how long you accepted less than you deserved. But in that collapse, something rare happened. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't rush to fill the silence. You sat in it, faced it, and that silence became a mirror, because what left with her wasn't just a relationship, it was the illusion that you needed her to be whole. That illusion had you wrapped around approval, around validation, around the hope that one day she would finally see your worth. But when she walked out, she took the illusion with her. And in its place, you found something far more valuable. Space. Space to breathe, space to detach, space to meet the man underneath the anxiety, the waiting, the overthinking. The version of you that wasn't constantly reacting to her moods or proving your value. The man you forgot you were before her attention became your oxygen. She thought walking away would make you spiral. She thought you'd fall apart and come crawling back. But instead, you vanished, not to hurt her, not to win, but because something inside you snapped into place. For the first time in a long time, you were done performing. You didn't just lose a woman, you lost a version of yourself. And maybe that's the greatest gain of all, because what you lost wasn't love, it was your own self-neglect. And now, without the noise, without the chase, without the illusion, you're free to rebuild. This time, not to be chosen, but to finally choose yourself. 2. Silence says everything. There's a kind of silence that isn't passive. It isn't surrender. It isn't weakness. It's the silence that arrives after you've said everything that needed to be said, through your consistency, your presence, your patience, and none of it was heard. It's the silence that doesn't chase, that doesn't explain, that doesn't plead to be understood anymore. When she walked away, she expected what most expect after rejection: a man scrambling for another chance, a man trying to bargain, to make sense of the loss, to fight for what's slipping away. She expected noise, arguments, late-night texts, long messages filled with longing and confusion, because that's the pattern she's seen. That's the validation people crave when they think they hold the upper hand. But this time she got something else. She got nothing. No reaction, no message, no performance. Just the kind of silence that forces a person to face themselves. Because in the quiet, there's no one to blame. No back and forth to distract her from the truth. No emotional chaos to mask the consequences of her own decisions. Only stillness. Only reflection. Every message you don't send becomes a statement. You are no longer available to be disrespected, overlooked, or half-loved. Every urge you resist is a boundary drawn in discipline. And with each passing day, that silence doesn't fade. It grows heavier. It begins to press down on her pride. It interrupts her confidence. It makes her wonder, why isn't he chasing me? Did I misjudge him? Did I matter at all? That's when it begins to haunt her. Because silence has a power words rarely reach. It speaks in absence. It delivers truth without debate. And when used from a place of clarity, not ego, not spite, it says the one thing she didn't expect to hear: I don't need you to understand. I just need peace. The most powerful thing you can do after she walks away is nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do, about yourself. And when a man chooses stillness over chaos, clarity over conflict, dignity over desperation, his silence becomes the loudest truth of all. 3. No attention, no control. She didn't need to ask if you were still there, because your presence was constant. You watched her stories within seconds. You liked the posts, replied to the updates, noticed the haircuts, and read between the lines of every caption. Your attention was steady, predictable, and always available. And in the beginning, maybe that felt like connection. But over time, it became a silent transaction. She gave little, and you gave everything. She didn't have to wonder where she stood with you, because your eyes never left her. But something changes when a man reclaims his energy. You pull back, not with bitterness, not to punish her, but because you finally realize what that attention costs. Every scroll, every glance, every moment spent orbiting her world was time stolen from your own. And when that realization hits, you unplug. No likes, no views, no responses. You stop feeding the ego that never fed you in return. At first, she doesn't notice. She thinks it's a glitch. That maybe you're busy, distracted. But silence has a way of sharpening over time. Days go by, her story goes unwatched, her baited post falls flat, and suddenly, the attention she always assumed would be there isn't. The space you once filled becomes a vacuum, not because you're being petty, but because she had grown used to being the center of a world that revolved around her validation. And now, without that validation, she begins to feel a discomfort she can't name, a shift in the balance, a growing suspicion that something has changed, and it's not you chasing anymore. This is where emotional scarcity begins to haunt her, not because you became cold, but because you became conscious. Because what's always available is never rare, and what's never rare is never respected. You're no longer the man who gives without being chosen, no longer the one who offers presents in hopes of being noticed. You've stopped checking for her, not because you've stopped caring altogether, but because you've finally started caring about yourself more. Your attention is no longer something she can reach for whenever it suits her. It's something she has to earn. And that shift, quiet, deliberate, powerful, is what she never expected. Because now the silence isn't just an absence, it's a consequence. Fourth, stop reacting. Break the game. After she leaves, the silence between you isn't always honest. Sometimes it's a setup. She might post a picture that's just provocative enough to make you wonder. She might like an old photo of yours just to leave a breadcrumb. Or she might reach out with something vague. Hope you're doing okay. A line that means nothing but is meant to stir something. She's not checking in. She's checking control. She wants to see if she still holds space in your mind, if she can still pull the same emotional levers, if one small move is enough to make you drop your boundaries and return to her orbit. And for a lot of men, that tactic works. The moment they feel noticed again, they crumble, they respond, they reopen the door, and just like that, the game resets. She doesn't want you back. She just wants to confirm she could still have you if she changed her mind. But this time, you don't bite. You see the pattern now. You see the way she turns silence into a mirror, hoping to catch your reflection before you disappear completely. And instead of reacting, you pause. You let the bait float in the water, and you walk away. Not in anger, not in ego, but in full awareness that the game only works when you play it. She might test you, she might reach out just to see if the leash still fits. But now, it doesn't. Because the man you are today doesn't respond to manipulation dressed up as sentiment. You're no longer the version of yourself that clings to every digital signal, overanalyzing tone and timing. You've detached from the cycle, the highs, the lows, the confusion. And when you stop reacting, something strange happens. She's left alone with her own behavior. No push, no pull, just her and the silence. And in that space, the illusion of power fades. Because the truth is, she never had power over you. You just hadn't realized yours. Now you have. And that realization, that steady refusal to play the game she's counting on, is what breaks it completely. 5. Disappear, then evolve. The most powerful transformations never happen in public. They don't need applause, recognition, or validation. They happen in silence, far from her eyes, far from the noise, far from the version of you she thought she understood. After heartbreak, most men rush to prove something. They post more. They make sure she sees they're doing fine. But that's not evolution. That's performance. And performance always comes from a place of weakness. Real change happens when you disappear. Not because you're hiding, but because you've realized this next version of you isn't meant to be witnessed in progress. It's meant to be revealed when complete. You don't broadcast your healing. You don't seek her attention. You rebuild in the shadows, quietly, ruthlessly. You get back in the gym. You study, you work, you cut distractions. You stop watching her life and start mastering your own. No announcements, no proof, just progress. Let her sit with the last memory she has of you, the man who tried, who showed up, who gave more than he got. Let her replay the last words, the last look, the last silence, because that's all she'll have. She won't see this version. She won't get a preview. You're not giving her access to the man who rose from the ruins she left behind. And when your name comes up in conversation months from now, when she hears whispers of your success, your stillness, your glow, she won't recognize the man they're talking about, because that man doesn't chase, that man doesn't beg, that man doesn't build with the audience in mind. He builds with purpose. He builds for himself. You don't owe her updates. You don't owe her closure. You owe yourself the discipline to go all in on your own growth without needing anyone to notice. That's the evolution that changes everything. Not the kind that makes noise, but the kind that makes impact. Because when she finally realizes who you've become, it'll be too late. She won't just miss you. She'll miss the chance to ever know this version of you again. Let her sit in the last memory she has of you while you evolve into someone she'll never recognize. That's not revenge. That's rebirth. 6. Be the gravity now. There was a time when your world revolved around her. Her moods, her silence, her validation. You adjusted yourself to stay in her orbit, thinking that proximity meant closeness, that constant attention would keep her anchored. But the truth is, you were moving around someone who never stopped spinning away from you. And in doing so, you drifted further from yourself. That version of you is gone, because something shifts when a man stops orbiting and starts centering. You've stopped chasing, not out of pride, not to prove a point, but because you've grounded yourself in something deeper: purpose, clarity, peace. You're no longer moving in circles trying to win approval. You've become the gravity, still, powerful, unshaken, and in that stillness, everything begins to align around you. She notices the shift. She feels it, even in silence. She posts, hoping for a response. She waits, hoping for your reach. But you're not moving toward her anymore, and in that absence the roles reverse. She used to be the sun, the center of your focus. Now she's just another planet spinning in quiet confusion, wondering why she no longer feels the warmth she once took for granted. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain your growth. It's visible in your discipline, in your stillness, in your refusal to perform. That's what draws people in, not the noise, not the neediness, but the rare energy of a man who's no longer looking outside himself for meaning. You've become the sun, and she's just another planet spinning in silence, hoping to feel your gravity again. But your gravity doesn't chase. It holds, it centers, it creates pull without effort, without words, and the more you stay rooted, the more she feels the distance, not because you're trying to punish her, but because you've finally returned to the place you never should have left, your own center. That's where true attraction begins, not when you try to be everything to someone, but when you become everything to yourself. 7. Indifference cuts deepest. She expected something when she walked away, maybe anger, maybe heartbreak, maybe a desperate attempt to fix what was broken. She was ready for an emotional reaction, something loud, messy, undeniable. That's what she's used to. That's how she's measured her impact in the past, by how hard someone tries to hold on. But this time, there's no noise, no pleading, no bitterness, just nothing. You're not angry. You're not sad. You're not trying to be okay. You are okay. And that's what shakes her. Because indifference doesn't give her a story to tell. It doesn't feed the ego. It doesn't open a door for future control. It just exists, quiet, steady, unmoved. And in that stillness, something happens. She realizes she no longer has access, not to your emotions, not to your attention, not even to your pain. You've withdrawn, not out of spite, but out of clarity. You're not punishing her. You're simply unavailable for anything that disturbs your peace. That's what real detachment looks like. Not coldness, but calm. Not avoidance, but acceptance. There's no text coming, no outburst, no last-ditch effort to prove your worth. You're not watching her anymore. You're not waiting. You've stopped investing energy into someone who chose to walk away. And that decision, that refusal to perform or participate, cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. Indifference is louder than hate, because hate still implies care, still implies connection. But indifference, it signals the end. It tells her that the story is over, not paused, not unfinished, but closed. It tells her that you no longer define yourself through her lens, that your emotional center no longer belongs to her, that she's lost something she never thought she would, your focus. And now, when she tries to provoke a response, there's only silence. When she reaches for control, there's only space. She didn't expect that, because the man who used to give everything now gives nothing. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he's finally chosen himself. That's the cut that leaves no scar, but never stops stinging. 8. No response, no power. She used to know exactly where your buttons were and how to press them. A delayed reply, a vague story, a subtle jab cloaked in concern. And every time you reacted, you texted back, you explained, you defended your intentions, clarified your silence, tried to show her you still cared. That response was her fuel. It kept her in control, even from a distance. It gave her proof that no matter what happened, she could still pull you back in with a whisper. But something's changed. Now, the text comes, and you don't answer. The baited post drops, and you don't watch. The nostalgia trap lands in your inbox, and you let it sit. You're not being cold, you're being conscious. You've finally realized that every time you respond to manipulation, you hand over the very thing she's trying to reclaim, your energy. And this time, you're not giving it away, because every message you don't send is a rep in the emotional gym. Every urge you resist is a quiet act of discipline. And the more you do it, the more you reclaim something vital, your center. You're not just ignoring her, you're rewiring yourself. You're reminding your nervous system that chaos isn't love and that peace doesn't need permission. And the effect on her? It's more powerful than anything you could say, because she's not used to being met with silence. She's used to pulling you back with half effort. She's used to having you dance for clarity. But now there's no music, no movement, just stillness. And that stillness begins to make her question her hold over you. Her power fades with every moment you don't engage. Not because you've become heartless, but because you've grown stronger. This version of you doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, doesn't respond to signals meant to test old wounds. You finally realize that not every message deserves your time, not every move requires a counter, and not every memory is worth reopening. You're no longer reacting, you're evolving, quietly, powerfully, one rep at a time. 9. Let regret do the work. Regret doesn't crash in loudly. It arrives quietly, like a shadow creeping across the floor. It doesn't come during the argument or even the goodbye. It comes later, when the silence doesn't break, when the notifications stay empty, when she posts something meant to catch your attention and you don't take the bait. At first, she tells herself you're just taking space, that you'll come around, that it's only a matter of time before you show up again, reminding her that she still matters. But days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and nothing comes. No calls, no explanations, no passive likes. You haven't watched her story. You haven't checked her page. You haven't even tried to show that you care. And that's when it starts to hit. Not because you did anything to punish her, but because you didn't. You simply let go, fully, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You removed yourself from her world without drama, without a scene, without seeking closure. You just disappeared and left behind a silence she can't escape. That silence becomes her mirror, and it reflects the cost of her decision, not instantly but slowly. When her ego quiets down, when the distractions fade, when the noise of moving on wears thin, that's when your absence begins to haunt her. Because what once felt like control now feels like loss. What once felt like freedom now feels like emptiness. You've become the consequence, not out of vengeance, but out of growth. You didn't walk away to teach her a lesson. You walked away because you finally understood yours. That love isn't meant to be begged for. That your peace is worth more than someone's confusion. That closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's the echo of everything you didn't say. And the more she sits with that silence, the more regret takes root. Quietly, relentlessly. It doesn't scream, it whispers, "You lost him, and he's not coming back." You never needed to prove your worth. You only needed to remove it from places that never saw it clearly. And now, without lifting a finger, the work is being done for you by silence, by absence, by time. Let regret do the work. It always does. 10. Outgrow her completely. This was never about proving that you could move on faster or pretending you didn't care. Growth doesn't need to be loud or performative. True growth is quiet. It happens when you no longer check her page, not because you're forcing yourself, but because it simply doesn't cross your mind. It happens when her opinion no longer holds weight, not because you're angry, but because you've found something far more meaningful than her validation, your own. You didn't go through the pain just to loop back to the same version of the past. You didn't heal just to show her you're okay. You transformed so deeply that the idea of returning no longer fits. It's not avoidance. It's not detachment out of fear. It's maturity. It's the realization that your peace, your purpose, and your future aren't tied to someone who didn't value them when they had the chance. Now you're unreachable. Not because you blocked her, not because you're trying to make a point, but because you've outgrown the emotional patterns that used to trap you. The version of you she once knew, the one who over-explained, who waited, who wanted to be chosen, is gone. You buried him in the silence. You rebuilt him in solitude. She might look for signs that you still care. She might test the waters, wondering if you'll respond. But she'll find nothing, no trace, no echo, because your attention has turned inward. And the more you've poured into yourself, the more invisible she's become. That's not revenge. That's evolution. You don't need her to regret. You don't need her to apologize. And you sure as hell don't need her to come back. Because this new version of you, he's whole, he's steady, he's focused, and most importantly, he's free. You don't need her validation. You need you. And now, you've got him. Let me make something clear. This isn't about punishing her, manipulating her, or trying to make her miss you. It's about waking up. A woman leaving doesn't just remove her presence. It reveals how much of yourself you gave away to keep her. You didn't just lose her. You lost the version of you that overgave, over-explained, and forgot who the hell he was. And that loss, that was necessary. Because in that empty space, the real work began. Silence isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's what allows you to hear yourself again. Most men waste that silence by filling it with noise, texting, chasing, trying to be understood. But the man who stays still, he becomes dangerous. He becomes rare, because he doesn't move to be noticed. He moves with purpose. This entire journey was never about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back. The attention you used to pour into her, you now give to your craft, your health, your mind. The reactions you used to offer up so easily, you now reserve for things that actually deserve your energy. And the identity you once wrapped around being chosen, you've unwrapped it and remembered that your worth was never up for debate in the first place. Here's the truth. When you stop giving your power away, they feel it. When you stop chasing, they start questioning. When you disappear without bitterness and evolve without needing applause, that's when your absence becomes the loudest thing in the room. So no, you're not unreachable because you blocked her. You're unreachable because you finally outgrew the version of you who waited to be seen. And now, you see yourself. That's the win. That's the work. And that's what makes you untouchable. If something in this message spoke to the part of you that's done waiting to be chosen, let it sink in. Let it stir something real inside you, because that feeling, that's your truth rising to the surface. Let it guide your next move. Like this video. Subscribe to Stoic Station. Turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. And in the comments, write this with conviction. I don't return to what broke me. Because a man who knows his worth doesn't chase love. He becomes the reason it stays.